The Little Prince and the Celestial Garden. The desert was silent, vast, and golden. The sun had just dipped behind the dunes, and a cool wind brushed the pilot's face as he knelt beside his broken aircraft. His hands were tired, stained with oil, and his hope was wearing thin. Nightfall brought a choir of stars above, but also a sense of deep solitude. Suddenly, a voice as soft as the night breeze broke the silence. "Excuse me, could you draw me a sheep?" The pilot froze. He turned slowly, and standing a few steps away was a child, not an ordinary one. His golden hair glimmered like sunlight trapped in silk. His eyes held a strange wisdom, both ancient and innocent. "A sheep?" the pilot asked, thinking he must be hallucinating. The boy nodded. "Yes, I need one to care for my flower." Still stunned, the man reached for his notebook and pencil and sketched a sheep as best as he could. The boy studied it carefully, then smiled. "This one is perfect. It looks kind." The pilot, trying to make sense of this encounter, asked, "Who are you? And how did you end up here?" The child sat beside him on the sand. "I come from a very small planet, one so small that I can watch the sunset 43 times a day if I move my chair just a bit." "That's impossible," the pilot whispered. "Not on asteroid E72, the boy replied with certainty. "That's my home. I live there with a very delicate flower. She is proud and mysterious. She believes she is the only one of her kind in the whole universe." There was a quiet moment between them. The stars above shimmered as if eavesdropping. "And why did you leave her?" the man asked. The boy looked down at the sand and traced a circle with his finger. "She told me nothing, but her silence was too loud. I had to leave to understand what it truly means to care for someone." The desert no longer felt as vast. For the first time in days, the pilot no longer felt alone. Before the little prince crossed galaxies and wandered among the stars, his life revolved around a single thing: his flower. She had grown slowly, hidden at first inside a tiny bud. For days, the prince had watched her struggle to bloom. He protected her from the winds with glass domes and covered her roots with blankets of dew. He brought her sunshine when she asked for warmth and shaded her when she claimed the sun was too strong. And then, one morning, she blossomed. Her petals were unlike anything he had ever seen, like crystal silk, soft yet radiant, glowing faintly in twilight. Her perfume filled the entire planet with a fragrance so delicate, even the shooting stars paused to breathe it in. "I was born with the dawn," she told him, stretching her stem, "and I am the only flower of my kind." The little prince was enchanted. He spent every hour tending to her, listening to her whimsical demands and curious questions. But the flower was proud. "You must build me a screen. The wind is much too rude," she said. He obeyed. "And my thorns? Do you think they're strong enough to scare away tigers?" "There are no tigers on my planet," the prince had said, trying not to laugh. "That doesn't mean I shouldn't be protected," she snapped. Despite her moodiness, he adored her, yet her silence wounded him more than her words. Some days, she would turn her face away and say nothing at all. And when he asked, she simply answered, "You wouldn't understand." He began to wonder if she loved him or if she only needed his care. Then one morning, he stood at the edge of his planet, a tiny suitcase at his feet. She watched him silently. "I'm leaving," he whispered. "I need to know if you truly matter or if you're just beautiful." A breeze passed between them. The flower didn't speak for a long moment. Then, almost too softly to hear, she said, "I was foolish. Forgive me. I love you." But the wind carried her words away. He didn't hear them, and with that, he held on to a handful of stars and let them lift him into the sky. The little prince traveled far, holding tight to a golden comet's tail, until he landed on a curious world shaped like a spiral shell, spinning slowly in space. It was the first planet he visited on his journey, and it shimmered with 1,000 signs painted across its sky. As his feet touched the soft, mossy ground, he noticed a woman sitting beside a giant clock made of stars and silver wires. Her long robes flowed like pages of an ancient book, and her eyes sparkled with restless wonder. "Welcome," she said before he could speak. "Have you come seeking answers or offering questions?" The prince tilted his head. "I'm not sure. I left to understand love, but I don't even know what I'm looking for yet." She smiled gently. "Here, questions bloom like flowers. Some take years to open, others vanish before you ask them." She offered him a seat beside the ticking clock, which pulsed not with seconds, but with silences. Why do people only realize something matters when it's gone? He asked. The woman reached out and let a question float from her palm like a bubble. Because presence becomes invisible when it feels permanent. The little prince thought about his flower. He remembered the way her silence made him ache. And yet, now that she was far, her silence was all he could hear. Is it wrong to go away to understand love? He asked next. Another bubble formed and drifted upward. Sometimes we must leave to recognize what stayed with us all along. They sat together for what could have been minutes or centuries. The prince noticed thousands of glowing questions floating in the sky above, some fading, some growing brighter. Do you ever answer them all? He asked. The woman shook her head. The answers live in your actions, not in your words. Ask, but do not rush the reply. The universe prefers echoes. As he stood to leave, the woman handed him a crystal jar for the questions that hurt too much to hold. He nodded, thanked her softly, and climbed onto a trail of moonlight that stretched across the sky. One planet behind him, infinite questions ahead. The little prince's next destination was a lonely planet, crowned by a throne larger than a mountain. As he descended, golden clouds swirled around statues of lions and banners that flapped in a wind that smelled like old parchment and dust. Sitting atop the enormous throne was a man dressed in layered robes, a heavy crown pressing down on his head. His beard fell in neat curls, and he held a long scepter that shimmered with stars. "Ah, a subject," the king declared as soon as he saw the prince. "Come closer, I command you." The little prince blinked. "A subject? But I don't even live here." The king waved his hand with exaggerated grace. "On my planet, everyone is my subject. Even the stars obey me. I command the sun to rise, and eventually, it does. I tell the moon to appear, and after some time, it listens." "But those things would happen anyway," the prince said with a curious frown. "Yes, but I give them permission," the king replied proudly. The little prince looked around. The land was vast and barren. Not a single person walked its roads, no birds flew its skies, and not even a whisper came from its valleys. "Who do you rule then?" he asked. "Everyone and everything," the king said confidently, "though they seldom bother me with requests. Still, I am a just ruler. Would you like a title? I could make you Grand Explorer of the Eastern Moons." "I don't need titles," the prince replied gently. "What I need is to understand the heart." The king frowned for the first time. Hearts cannot be ruled. They are disobedient. They change their mind without consulting a crown. Then maybe they need listening, not ruling, the little prince suggested. The king lowered his scepter slightly, the weight of his crown now more noticeable. "No one ever stayed long enough to tell me that." The prince stood, brushing stardust from his clothes. Perhaps power is not about control, but about care. The king did not reply. But for the first time in years, he watched someone walk away without trying to stop them. And in that silence, a seed of understanding was planted in the soil of his planet, though no one was there to see it bloom. The cosmic breeze carried the little prince to a world that spun faster than any other. The sky there changed colors every instant. Sometimes it was dawn, other times it plunged into dusk, all in the blink of an eye. It was like living between breaths of light and shadow. Upon landing, he noticed a man bent over, with precise steps, carrying a lit lantern. Every time the sun disappeared, the man would light it, and as soon as the light returned, he would extinguish it. He repeated this gesture dozens of times per hour. "Good morning," said the little prince, watching the man's exhausting rhythm. "There's no time for conversation," he replied, out of breath. "The rules say I must light the lantern at sunset and extinguish it at sunrise. Since the day here lasts only a minute, I don't rest." "But why continue if no one else lives here?" The lantern keeper paused, just for a second, and stared at the prince with tired but kind eyes. "Because it is what I have been entrusted with. Keeping the light on, even if no one sees it, is a sacred duty." The little prince sat silently. He watched the man repeat the gesture more than 30 times. Each movement was the same as the last, but there was a quiet tenderness in his dedication. "You are the only one among the planets I've visited who doesn't think only of yourself," the prince commented. The man smiled, surprised. "Perhaps because the light I care for is for those who will come after." Those words stayed in the little prince's heart like a forgotten song. He understood that sometimes love is this: to shine even when no one sees, to take care of something without expecting anything in return, trusting that a simple gesture can touch the invisible. Before leaving, the prince left something next to the man, the small crystal jar he had received on the planet of questions. Inside, he had stored a doubt. Is love about enduring even without an answer? The lantern keeper didn't open the jar, but he felt its weight, and in that moment, his light seemed to shine even more brightly. The little prince climbed once again the golden threads of the sky, leaving behind a world where night and day played at running, but where love remained in the form of a flame that would never go out. The journey of the little prince led him to a planet entirely covered by mirrors. Every surface reflected the sky, the ground, the stars, and most importantly, itself. It was a world where everything shone, but nothing truly looked. In the center of a mirrored square, seated in a spinning chair adorned with crystals, was an elegant man dressed in golden clothes with a silver comb attached to his belt. He spun slowly, admiring his reflection from every possible angle. "Ah, a visitor!" he exclaimed, noticing the little prince. "Tell me, am I or am I not the most beautiful in the universe?" The prince watched him for a few seconds before replying with honesty. "You seem very concerned with what you see, but not attentive to what you feel." The vain man smiled, as if he hadn't heard. "Look at this profile. Look at this gaze. No one has ever shone as brightly as I do. And you, little boy, have you come to admire me too?" "Actually, I came to understand what makes someone forget about others." The man paused for a moment. "Forget others? But how could I forget someone who has never been at my level? Others just interrupt my reflection." The little prince walked through the mirrored halls. With every step, he saw the man repeated 1,000 times. But he saw no one else. No memories, no portraits of affection, no marks of shared history. "Have you never felt alone?" The vain man stood up, adjusting his sleeves. "Alone? I have myself, and I am more than enough." "Perhaps you are," replied the prince with tenderness. "But the most beautiful shine isn't the one that's seen. It's the one that is offered." The man didn't respond. For the first time, he looked into a mirror and didn't smile. His eyes found not a reflection, but an emptiness disguised as beauty. Before leaving, the little prince left a paper rose next to the central mirror. It didn't reflect anything, but it broke the perfection with its simplicity. And in that planet of shining surfaces, a touch of imperfection finally revealed something real. The little prince landed on a cold, flat plain where no flowers bloomed and no winds danced. In front of him, towers of metal reached up to the sky, filled with lights trapped in small glass boxes. Inside each box, stars twinkled, looking sad, as if they had forgotten how to shine freely. Sitting in front of a machine that emitted metallic sounds, a man in a dark suit typed endlessly on an old calculator. Around him, piles of papers and charts grew like mountains. "Are you a star too? Are you for sale?" he asked without looking up. "I'm none of that," said the little prince, confused. "Why do you trap stars?" "Because they are valuable," the man replied. "Each one has a number. Each number has a price, and what has a price has an owner." The little prince walked up to one of the boxes. Inside, a star seemed to want to escape, its light pulsing silently. But stars were born to shine in the sky. In here they seem sick. The man laughed. "Feelings don't count in reports. Emotions don't generate profit. What matters is that I can say they are mine. And what do you do with them, besides counting?" "I count them again," the man answered, now with his eyes fixed. "And then I write it down. What's important is owning. Understanding would make me lose time." The little prince sat down and thought about the stars in his own sky. He didn't own them, but he looked at them every night, feeling accompanied. He thought of his rose, which also wasn't his, but which he cared for as if it were unique. "You don't love anything you count, do you?" The man hesitated for the first time. Love is not profitable." The prince stood up. "Then your boxes are full of silence." Before leaving, the boy discreetly opened one of the boxes. The star escaped silently, flying back into the sky like a spark of hope. The sky welcomed it with joy, and it shone brighter than any of the others before. The prince took one last look at the man, who was now trying to find where he had gone wrong with the numbers, and he left, carrying in his heart the certainty that true value never fits into a spreadsheet. The next planet resembled an endless library, Mountains of maps, old globes, and encyclopedias were scattered across narrow halls where dust danced in the still air. At the center of it all, sitting at a huge table filled with compasses and magnifying glasses, was a man with a long beard and a fixed gaze, the geographer. He was drawing lines on scrolls with absolute precision, never once looking out the window. "Are you mapping the world?" asked the little prince, curious about the intricate drawings. "Yes," the man replied, without looking up. "I am responsible for recording everything that exists. And have you seen these mountains? Have you walked these rivers?" The geographer sighed, as if hearing a foolish question. "No, of course not. I stay here. It's the explorers who come and tell me. I record." "But how can you know if all this still exists? What if the flowers have died? What if the seas have dried up?" "It doesn't matter. What matters is recording. The world changes, but paper remains." The little prince walked through the hall. He saw maps of forests that may have already been burned, rivers drawn where there might now be sand, and mountains recorded with precision, but without soul. "Have you never felt like leaving?" "I was young once," said the geographer. "But knowledge requires stability. Exploring is risky. I prefer the certainty of data." The little prince approached the window. Outside, the planet seemed full of wonderful landscapes, but all untouched. No footprints, no record of real steps. Everything existed only in books. Perhaps what is not lived cannot truly be known. The geographer did not respond. For the first time, his pen stopped in midair. Before leaving, the little prince left a gift, a broken compass with a note that read, "Sometimes getting lost is the only way to discover something new." And then he rose back to the sky, where the constellations changed with each beat of the heart, reminding that life does not fit into descriptions alone, but in encounters. After so many planets, the little prince found himself back in a silent place, where the sand stretched to the horizon. There were no trees, no houses, only the wind and the sound of his own heart. There, sitting on a golden dune, he waited for someone. A golden snake, with eyes like stardust, watched him in silence. Its presence was not threatening. There was something serene about it, as if it knew the secrets of time. "You've returned," said the snake, its voice sounding like an ancient breeze. "Yes," replied the little prince, "but now I am different." "Then have you learned what you came to find?" He sat down on the sand. "I met kings who ruled over nothing, vain men who only knew how to admire themselves, men who counted stars without understanding them, and geographers who knew everything but felt nothing." The snake made a slight movement. "And your rose? She is on my planet, alone, and still, she is unique. Are you ready to return?" The little prince hesitated. "Yes, but how do you return to something that lives only within you?" The snake approached slowly. "Sometimes to return, you must disappear from here, to exist better there." He understood. It was the kind of answer that doesn't fit into words, only in the silence between them. "Will you bite me?" "If that's what you wish, yes, but it's not an end. It's a beginning where your eyes won't reach." The little prince looked up at the sky. The stars seemed closer, as if calling him. He thought of his rose. He thought of his small, beloved planet. He thought of the laughter he had promised to those who would meet him. And then he lay down on the sand with a peaceful smile. The snake coiled in delicate spirals. There was a breath, and then only the breeze. The next day, the little prince disappeared, like a star hiding behind clouds, leaving only a faint glow in its place. He was no longer in the desert, but his spirit wandered, free like the stars he had loved so much. And on his planet, the rose bloomed more radiant, more steadfast, as if she too had learned that true beauty is not seen with the eyes, but with the heart. The traveler, who for some time had journeyed to other planets in search of answers, now knew that the greatest secret of life lay in the small things. He had known at some point that questions didn't require complex answers, but rather simple gestures of affection and love. And so, on a quiet night, while looking at the stars, the man felt as if a soft laughter echoed in the heights. It was a laughter of pure happiness, like that of a child who knows the secret of a story and carries it within. He closed his eyes, his heart full of memories of the little prince. A sense of peace enveloped him. He knew that wherever the prince was, he continued to shine, not just in the sky, but within every being who had the privilege of seeing the world with the eyes of one who loves. And when someone in a distant land looked up at the sky and saw a star shining brighter than the others, perhaps they could feel, deep within their heart, that the little prince never truly left. He would remain there, laughing with the stars, leaving the world a little lighter, a little more beautiful, with each new dawn.